So this right here isn't any ordinary webOS phone because unlike every model that was ever released, it doesn't have a physical keyboard. And that's because this is a rare prototype device that was manufactured sometime before HP abruptly decided to stop making webOS hardware altogether. It's known as the WindsorNot, and it gives us a glimpse into HP's future vision for their mobile platform had things turned out differently. It's something that most of the world has never gotten to see up close before. But thanks to a viewer named David, who some of you will recognize as the same guy who sent me that new old stock touchpad a while back, we're going to be exploring this thing in detail today, along with this miniature touchpad prototype that he sent over as well. So yeah, it's going to be a really exciting one, but first, here's a little backstory. Now, both of these devices were slated for release in 2011, the same year that the Veer, Pre 3, and full-size touchpad were announced. But the WindsorNot started to run into problems long before HP's fatal decision that would come in August. According to a webOS Nation article archived by the Wayback Machine, HP was already having internal discussions about the future of webOS devices even before they released the first set of products that had their logo slapped on. These included thinner, faster, and more powerful touchpads, even a model that had a slide-out physical keyboard, much like Palm smartphones, and a version of the Touchstone charging dock with Bluetooth audio support. The WindsorNot was among these as well, but it required a lot of work, especially on the software side, before it could be released. Because of its departure from the Palm tradition of having a physical keyboard built in, the operating system had to be heavily modified to function properly. So that's probably why HP decided to load it up with webOS 3, the newer software version designed for the HP touchpad. The Pre 3 and the Veer, on the other hand, shipped with webOS 2, just like the prior generation Palm devices. So this essentially meant that HP now had to take their version of webOS they had already scaled up for use on a larger display and shrink it back down for use on a smartphone. And as you'll see in a minute, the software on this unit here is pretty early into that process. So what ended up happening was the Pre 3 and the Veer were prioritized and the WindsorNot's release was pushed back to the end of the year. But that created another problem because AT&T, the sole carrier partner for the WindsorNot, apparently did not want to have any newly released phones on their network that didn't have support for LTE by that time, which the WindsorNot did not. The overarching problem, however, was a change in HP's leadership that denied Palm the necessary resources to get everything finished on schedule and work on all of these phones at the same time. This came to light in a 2012 interview with Phil McKinney, the former CTO of HP's Personal Systems Group, where he went over the original plan for HP's buyout of Palm. And the gist of it was, HP was basically going to do nothing but bankroll Palm for the first 3 years of ownership. Palm was struggling financially at the time, so it was thought that with HP's resources, they could focus on getting profitable again and increasing webOS's market share without having to worry about bankruptcy. So the buyout was a long-term investment for HP. However, 7 months after the acquisition, HP appointed Leo Appeltaker as CEO, who didn't even last a year in the position before being dismissed. But the one notable thing he did during his tenure was pull the plug on webOS hardware. On HP's third quarter earnings call in 2011, he said that touchpad sales were not meeting the company's expectations and that because of market conditions and significant competition, it just wasn't worth it for the company to continue developing webOS hardware. But I think that Phil McKinney summed all of this up really well when he said, "This is an example of not committing long-term resources and not having the patience for innovation." So HP's decision was very abrupt, and it obviously shocked webOS users everywhere, and it meant that devices like these never saw the light of day outside of HP. But a few prototypes did manage to make their way out of the company's headquarters, so we're going to take a closer look at these things today. Alright, so we're going to take a look at the WindsorNot first here, and the name WindsorNot, if you're curious, comes from another webOS prototype that was being worked on around this time called the Windsor. So So essentially saying that this is not that. I know, really great development humor, right? But yeah, the really cool thing about this device is it's essentially a mesh between the HP Pre 3 and the HP TouchPad. Because like I already mentioned, it does not have a physical keyboard. So that means the device is much thinner than the Pre 3 was. But it's got kind of the same design language that the HP TouchPad has. We have that same home button down here, essentially just copy pasted from it, though it is a little bit smaller. Also up here, we've got your handset speaker as well as a front-facing camera. And if we flip the phone over to the back, we've got this nice rear plating with the HP logo and everything. And we've got your rear-facing camera and flash. Up at the top, we've got your sleep-wake switch, your silent switch, and a headphone jack. And by the way, I think this is pretty nice placement for the sleep-wake switch. I've actually never used a phone that's had it placed like this before. Maybe it shows how much of an iPhone user I am, but yeah, it just feels very natural just to reach up there to, you know, unlock and lock the phone. On the left side here, we've got your volume controls. On the right side, we don't have anything, but on the bottom, you've got your micro USB port for charging. Although there is, if we flip it over to the back here, we have this number here, which is probably like an internal identification code or something like that, but still nothing that like directly identifies this as a prototype. However, if we take off the battery cover here, and you see we've got a big old label in here that says prototype, not for sale, property of HP, with, oh look at that, the S in sale is actually a $sign, I just noticed that. And we have this white sticker here with a bunch of markings on it, and we'll get to that in a moment. And something that's neat about this back plate is if we flip over to the back side, we've got these gold contacts here. Those line up with these pins over here, and that is so that you can use this thing with a wireless charger. So yeah, we'll set the rear plate aside there, and we'll take a look at all these markings in here. And you see I've already taken out the battery. The battery is exactly the same as what comes in an HP Pre 3. It's the same specifications and everything, except for the fact that this one has a label on the back that says not for sale EVT1 sample 10/09/28, which I believe is a date code for September 28th, 2010, which would put the manufacturer of this battery anyways long before even the HP Veer Pre 3 and TouchPad were announced in February 2011. Now this EVT marking is very important, and we also have it right here on the phone itself. EVT is short for Engineering Validation Test, and is typically the earliest prototype stage for a device like this. You also have Design Validation Test and Production Validation Test that come afterwards. So essentially that means this is in a pretty early development stage, and you're going to see that when we boot into the software as well, just how quirky that it is running on this much smaller display. Now, the battery here is not the only thing that the WindsorNot shares with the Pre 3. At least this particular unit also has a 1.4 gigahertz processor and 8 gigabytes of internal storage. Now, the Pre 3 also had a 16 gigabyte storage option. You can see we have a checkbox for that right here. But there's also a 4 gigabyte checkbox, and there's also a 1.0 gigahertz processor checkbox. So it looks like they were experimenting with a few different types of components here. You can see we also have checkboxes for panel, DDR, LCD, USB, MED, and PCB, and those look to be just different hardware vendors where they would have gotten those parts from. We also have some identifying information on the top here. That top line says WN, short for WindsorNot, EVT, again, Engineering Validation Test, Group C1, so that might have been a development group or something like that, CDMA, VZW for Verizon, which is interesting because of some of the stuff we have installed on here, which I'll show you that once we boot it up. And speaking of, why don't we just pop the battery back in here and get this thing booted up and check out the really experimental version of webOS 3 that's installed on this thing. So like I was talking about earlier, the main thing you're going to notice as we go throughout this operating system is just that a lot of the UI elements are not sized properly for this smaller display. A great example of that is the little control center like actions menu up here at the top right. I mean, look at how small that is. That seems like it should be much larger, probably taking up like the entire display when you open it, because I've actually gone through here and tried to like change the brightness and stuff, and I've tapped on these other options. It's very easy to do that. But this is how it looks on the touchpad, so they just haven't sized that properly. But then we've got funny quirks like this. I mean, look at the size of this calendar icon down here. It is much larger than everything else in the dock and in the applications menu. It really stands out. So yeah, for whatever reason that happens, and it also sometimes shows up as just a black box, like it can't load the icon properly. I don't know exactly what causes that, but I've had that happen a previous time when I powered up this device. Yeah, it just didn't display the calendar icon whatsoever. And you might see, well, you probably don't recognize these applications, but we've got this Collect Logs and Jira Junior. These are some development applications that we'll get into in a moment. But first, I want to touch on some of the other, UI scaling problems. And one of those is like with the tab groups here in the applications menu. So you see how like downloads, it feels like there should be more spacing, on both sides of it, like with settings and favorites and apps here. But not just that. If we go over to downloads, check this out. We've got some text that's actually seeping over from the favorites category. And it also seeps over into settings as well. So yeah, that's just something that, again, they have not scaled properly. And I just accidentally launched sound there. We'll get out of that. But one thing I've noticed is if you turn the device to landscape, it generally fixes most of the scaling problems. You see now downloads has more spacing on it. Although if we go back to favorites, it's not entirely fixed because now, this text just goes over the, bar there. But because we now have a width that is closer to the width of a tablet display, things generally show up much better system-wide. Another great example is the search option here on the home screen. And here is the on-screen keyboard, by the way. It shows up both in landscape and portrait. But if I were to turn this back to portrait, you will see that the search bar just goes off the screen and that text and icon there is off-centered. So yeah, you've got stuff like that as you go around the operating system. And you might have also noticed under downloads here, we have some AT&T applications. We've got AT&T Navigator and Yellow Pages Mobile, despite the fact that this is a Verizon CDMA phone that could not function on the AT&T network. So I'm assuming this was probably just some like restore image they had that they just, put on here. And it just had these applications even though, they wouldn't have shipped with the device, assuming this ever got a final release. And of course, there are some various bugs. One thing I have found is if you try to go into Screen and Lock and change the wallpaper, well, tough luck. You're not going to be able to do that because the wallpaper selector never comes up and the entire app just like freezes and you have to, close out of it. So we'll just do that here. Something else I want to show you, if we go into device info here, we can take a look at the version number and everything. But what's really cool is this was actually used, I mean, believe it or not, right, this is crazy, by an HP employee. They are logged into their Palm account here, their Palm profile, as it still says. That was actually changed to like HP account by the time that the HP TouchPad came out. Or sorry, it was actually called the HP webOS account. So yeah, I'd actually not noticed that before. They had not yet changed all the Palm stuff to HP. And I think, did this thing just freeze? I think it did. Okay. Yeah, that is a very common theme with prototype hardware. It is to be expected that you're going to run into various problems and such. So let's go ahead and try to power this thing back on. Now, powering this thing on from the battery being stone dead, it is very quirky. Sometimes it will not power up properly. Sometimes it'll just get stuck on where like the screen will be on, but it won't actually display anything. It'll sometimes get stuck on a screen that looks like this. But the few times I've tried to boot it up just from like taking the battery out, like it froze up like it just did, and then I had to put it back in, but the battery still had a charge, it tends to power up just fine. Although let's see if I just jinx myself here. Oh, look at that, we're actually okay. So you got the version number down there, which is just actually HP webOS Nova main. There's not actually like a version number, but you got your serial number, you got your memory, your available memory, and memory here is talking about like internal storage, not RAM. But we can go down here to more info, and this gives you the model number and the hardware version, E1, probably EVT1, perhaps a shortening of. And yes, it does say the carrier here is Verizon, so if you doubted that VZW inside of the battery compartment, well, there you go. Firmware, and you can go to software here and see the version of everything, which actually just says Nova main for most of this stuff. And then you got this little tiny back button down here, which looks really out of place in the bottom. So yeah, you have all your standard settings in here. Nothing is under favorites, and like I mentioned under downloads, we've got not only Quick Office, but also that AT&T software, which we can open up and take a look at. Now AT&T Navigator here, and there's actually a few other applications that do this. They open up in this like virtual WindsorNot phone interface, and I believe this was probably used to test these applications that were scaled down for the WindsorNot on like an HP TouchPad or some other development tablet they were probably further along with on the software development side, so that they could simulate running this application on a smaller display. In fact, like if I were to tap up here on the options menu, it should anyways open up the options menu for here, which that's not even working either. Is this thing just frozen again? Let's see. Maybe this isn't a good app to demonstrate it in, because it was working when I went into, like, let's see here, I believe the collect logs program. No, the collect logs program opens up just fine. Okay, well, we can take a look at this. So yeah, you can create logs with this. We can go to change logging levels, and this is all a whole bunch of just development settings in here. So you can set log levels for all these various applications. You got system log levels, all this stuff. The other application, I believe, if we go into the applications menu again, Jira Junior, however you say this one also opens up in this like miniature virtual interface. So if I were to tap right up here to open up like the options menu, you can see that it opens up right here on the virtual display. And this virtual home button here functions as a real home button. So, you can tap that just like pressing the physical home button. It will open up the multitasking cards interface if I can tap it correctly there. I guess sometimes it doesn't really work. Maybe you have to be really precise there. Yeah, there you go. Now, this application can't really do anything because it asks us to set up our Palm email account, which I have no way of doing. But yeah, so that's kind of a neat little like interface they got going on for a few of these applications. I think there was, one other one, maybe not, because all the regular webOS stuff, like the browser here, email, these all open up and display, in full screen. And there's no accounts on here, so it won't, show anything. I did go through here. There's not like any, internal like development communications or anything like that. There are no messages if we go in here, because I thought that would be kind of cool to see maybe if there was like some internal discussion between the developers. So here it is, and yeah, I mean, you see we got nothing. It just asks us to sign in to an account. You've also got this SIM Toolkit application, which does open up in this smaller window interface as well, although it just says there's, it's unable to retrieve SIM services menu. Either there are no SIM services provided by your mobile operator, or there was an error when talking to your SIM. I don't even think there's a SIM in here, so that's probably why. And, it's constantly searching for a signal as well. So, I mean, yeah, can't really do anything with that. There is also a phone dialer on here, which, makes sense. It is a phone. Interestingly enough, you see when it's like loading, it kind of displays a glitched UI there. But yeah, it's your typical phone dialer. We can go back there, and you have all your. Oh geez, look at I have not gone in here. Are these favorites? Okay, I just figured out how to get there. It's this button up here. I must have like misclicked on something. This, I believe, is opening up your contacts, but it just has all this AT&T stuff in here, which doesn't actually show up in the regular contacts application. But these are just all like mostly AT&T dial codes for like paying your bill and viewing data usage and stuff like that. So we can try to dial *3282#, which, oh, look at this. We got like an AT&T logo and everything. You can see how glitched out that the UI is. We got like 2 end call buttons there. It says connecting. I don't even think we have a... Oh, and wait a second. Why do we have AT&T stuff on here? This is a Verizon phone. I just forgot for a second. This is a Verizon phone. So yeah, again, I think this was probably just like restored from an image or something that just had all this AT&T stuff preloaded on here. Oh, and look at that. The calendar icon just changed to a black box. See, this is what I was talking about. It just like happens. Although I've not seen it happen like while the system was booted up before. That's hilarious. So yeah, let's see if it still opens up. I think it will. Opens up just fine, although the scaling and everything is going to be way off. So like check out that date up there. But yeah, you can navigate through here, and we can of course just go in here. I have seen this happen before on some of these applications. When you go to the cards interface, sometimes they will not like display properly. It'll just be like a black box like that. But yeah, now you can see we just have this black box, which I thought like for a second when I powered this on, because the first time that I powered this on, the calendar icon showed up and was large like that. Then I, powered it off and turned it back on again later, and this black box was here, and I was like, oh my god, did those pixels just die or something? Like, what the heck happened? But then I, rotated it, and I'm like, oh no, that's just the calendar icon not displaying properly. So it looks like I launched the web browser here by accident. So yeah, the web browser. I guess I haven't done a lot of typing on this. The typing experience is, pretty fine. I mean, I haven't used it extensively, but the keyboard shows up. I can type out like the Konami code in here. So yeah, by the way, if you didn't know, if you didn't see my last video, typing out the Konami code in the search menu, even on a non-development device, like on just a regular touchpad, it opens up it gives you the option to launch the developer mode enabler to, be able to, enable developer mode. I just think that's a really cool Easter egg. I thought it was worth mentioning again. So the keyboard is totally fine. You've got, your number options here. I don't know if there are any regional settings like oh, geez, look at that. Okay, now the calendar icon is like the search UI, but like scrunched down really and just screwed up. That's hilarious. I guess the calendar icon just has like a mind of its own now. But yeah, I'm actually curious if we go into, let's see if there are regional settings. Yeah, I'm curious if you can change the on-screen keyboard to like another layout. Yeah, add keyboard, okay. Well, it says no keyboard types are currently configured, but okay, we got QWERTY, Quartz, and AZERTY, so you can change the keyboard. So let's see if that actually takes effect. So we have AZERTY set up, so let's go in here, and yes, okay, so that's neat. So they do have a couple different keyboard layouts on here, but I definitely want to set that back to QWERTY here, since that's what we use over here in this part of the world. AZERTY and QWERTY now. So does that now give us the option to? I think it does. Look at that. Yeah. Okay. So you do have that option. That's kind of cool. So let's slide on that and delete. Now, I already know what some of you are saying. Try to delete this keyboard and see if you can do that. Okay, here's the thing. I don't want to screw this up at all. I don't know if like deleting this will make it to where I can't add it back or something like that. I feel like it would, because we have add keyboard right here, but David did say, he had one condition in sending these things to me, because he did loan these to me, by the way. He did not, give them to me, and understandable. These things are extremely rare prototypes, and I really appreciate him trusting me with them for this video. But he basically told me, don't screw anything up. Like, don't try to do anything weird. He didn't want me to sideload anything on here or like download applications to it from the internet. So I'm just not going to do that, because I mean, like I said, these are not mine. I do not want to risk screwing anything up. Oh, and look at that. I think the calendar icon finally fixed itself. Oh no, never mind. It's back to the old icon, the much larger one. Yeah, as I was saying, I pretty much just wanted to show you the, UI quirks and everything, and how this version of webOS 3 behaves on here, as well as the, few development tools that are on here. But if you would like to see some sideloaded webOS stuff, go ahead and check out my original touchpad video, because I did sideload some stuff onto that, and there are some really cool applications you can try out. But yeah, now what we're going to do is, speaking of the touchpad, we're going to check out this miniature version of it. Or if we want to be proper here, the TouchPad Go, because that was the official name this thing was going to carry if it ever actually got released. And I believe HP did get further along in development with the TouchPad Go than they did with the WindsorNot, because first of all, they didn't have to do any display scaling whatsoever on this thing, because webOS Nation reported when they got their hands on one of these things that this has the same 1024 by 768 resolution as the original touchpad, despite the fact that it is a smaller screen, meaning that, everything that shows up on the touchpad is going to show up just fine on this screen. What was really interesting is they pointed out that the pixel density went from 132 ppi on the original touchpad to 184 ppi on the TouchPad Go prototypes, which meant that this thing actually had the highest pixel density of any tablet on the market at that time. Another interesting thing about this is you can see it was primarily meant to be used in landscape. So you've got your home button down here, front-facing camera there, and your charging port is on the bottom here. And this one also came, David had this case for it, which is pretty similar to the case that I got with this touchpad here. It's not the exact same material though, this is more clothy, whereas the full-size case is more rubberized. If we flip it over to the back, one of the cool things about the TouchPad Go, they added a rear-facing camera in addition to the front-facing one we got on the regular touchpad. So yeah, if you're one of those people who just loves taking photos with your tablet, well, you could have done that on this TouchPad Go here. Assuming, of course, this actually made it into the final model if it ever got released. So we'll go ahead and set the prototype case here aside for now, and we'll take a look at the button placement on here. So you've got your sleep-wake button / power button up here at the top. You've got on the right side here your volume controls, and you also have a headphone jack right here. And then of course your micro USB port on the bottom. Nothing on the left side, but if we flip it over to the back, oh yeah, we've got some interesting stuff going on right here. So first of all, we've got a big old sticker that says LTE. Now this is pretty noteworthy because there was going to be a cellular version of the full-size touchpad. So apparently there was going to be a cellular version of the TouchPad Go as well. Just like on the WindsorNot, we've got this sticker here with the serial number and everything, and, you know, property of HP, prototype not for sale. So this has a 1.5 gigahertz CPU, a 32 gig SanDisk internal storage module. It's got 1 gigabyte of Samsung memory. And what I love too is under case here, it just says, "Don't care, cosmetic." So that's a really unique vendor name if you ask me. But yeah, so you got that sticker. It also says, right, where does it say? Right here, this is an EVT3 model. So EVT3, you know, it's still in the engineering validation test phase, but 3 indicates this was probably a little bit further along in the process than the WindsorNot here, which said EVT1. Now, this back cover is completely removable as well, just by popping this off here. So we'll just do that and take it off because there are a few things I want to show you inside. First of all, you see we have a sample by STL Technology battery with a part number there. And you see here we have a date code of April 2011, which is in between the announcement of the touchpad and the release of the touchpad. But we also actually have a date stamp for the rest of the hardware because we've got this sticker right here that's got a date of May 2011. You also got your SIM card slot right here and some pins, which if you remember from the WindsorNot, we got these contacts on the back of the back cover, which allows this thing to be used with a wireless charger. So yeah, we'll go ahead and put the back cover back on here, and we'll take a look at the software. Okay, so like I mentioned before, with the display in this thing having the same resolution as the original touchpad, there aren't really any UI bugs whatsoever. Everything shows up totally fine, and you actually have the same standard set of applications that come with the touchpad, with the exception of this one application under settings here. It's the AT&T Communication Manager. Now this just asks you to have a SIM card. We don't have a SIM card in here, so it's not really going to be able to do anything. But yeah, there aren't any like development applications or anything like that. But I have found one bug, and that is in the camera application here. For whatever reason, this thing has a problem switching between the two cameras. So right now we're on the rear camera. If I go ahead and try to use this button right here to swap it to the front, it will actually swap to the front for like the first... Okay, I swear this wasn't happening before. It was just freezing up every time I would try to swap the camera, and then the tablet would just crash and I'd have to restart it. Okay, well, let's see here. I went out of it and went back in, and it's definitely... Okay, this is what it was doing before. It would just hang on this screen, and... Okay, well, it did eventually recover here. That's good. Yeah, that's really interesting, because it was, I promise you, it was freezing up before when I would try to swap cameras, and the tablet would just crash eventually. Let's see if it does it here. Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be taking this long to display the camera. So yeah, this application is still pretty buggy, and I think that's because of the fact that it's, you know, there are two cameras now, and it has to be able to switch between them, which it can't, you know, do properly. But did you notice that we actually experienced the reverse of what usually happens on this channel, which is I say, hey, we're going to try this, and this is what's supposed to happen, and then it doesn't happen, and there's some problem that we run into. So that was actually kind of nice to finally expect something to go wrong, and something just worked. But you can see here it's still not actually, you know, loading the camera properly. So yeah, we can just get out of this. We'll actually leave it running in the background because why not? And I would like to go into settings here and go to device info, and I'll just show you what it says in here. It actually shows the proper version number this time. This is webOS 3.0.5. So I don't think this is really a development build then, because we don't have any development software. And I mean, we do have that one carrier program, but it actually says right here, it's an AT&T device in here. So, it makes sense that that is installed. If we go under software, yeah, we have actual version numbers for everything. So, I mean, yeah, like I said, aside from, that camera bug and probably some other stuff on here that I just haven't found yet, it is pretty much like using a standard HP touchpad. We can go out of this and go to the search menu here. The keyboard loads up just fine. We can change this back into, landscape, or not landscape, but portrait. And, do it either way if we want to. The keyboard changes and everything. No weird graphical glitches with the search, going off the screen like we did in the WindsorNot. And yeah, I mean, it's just a really, really cool. I mean, both of these are really, really fascinating to explore. And, it just makes you think, if these devices actually got to their final production stage, if HP didn't abruptly stop a webOS hardware development, I really think webOS could have competed with Android, especially in the tablet market, because Android on tablets back then, it was kind of like the dark days. I mean, it was pretty early on. Android wasn't really as refined for tablets at that point. In fact, I saw more than a few comments on my original touchpad video saying that, webOS looks so much smoother than Android did back then. But as I'm sure a lot of you know, webOS is still around today, but it was bought out by LG at some point, and it's used as an operating system on their smart TVs now. So yeah, it still kind of lives on in this sort of, it's not exactly the same thing, obviously, but there you have it, guys. Those are a couple of really, really fascinating webOS prototypes. And I need to give a huge thank you again to David for trusting some random YouTube guy with your really rare hardware here. I mean, this was just so fascinating to explore. I just really love taking a look at stuff like this. It's not every day when you get to mess around with some prototype hardware. So I really, really appreciate that. Thank you very much. And thank you all to you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this one, be sure to give it a thumbs up, get subscribed, maybe consider becoming a patron or a channel member to get early access to these videos before anybody else. But either way, as always, I will see you in the next video.